Welcome to AP World History Modern Podcast, topic 5.3, Industrial Revolution Begins. The essential question: what factors contributed to and characterized industrialization in the period from 1750 to 1900? Okay, in addition to new ideas, new technologies were reshaping society. So you got all these new ideas we talked about. So new ideas, new technologies. These technologies led to dramatic change in society and in the economies of these countries. The change is so dramatic that it's called the Industrial Revolution. And even though the AMSCO text doesn't talk about it, everything we're talking about in this chapter, start thinking about your family history. Because this is, I know we're talking about Europe for the most part, but this is going to make Detroit. I bet someone in your family, if you go back far enough, your family either traveled north to Detroit or they came over the Atlantic Ocean traveling west to get to Detroit. This is what's going to make Detroit eventually so attractive to people all over the world to come work and make money for their families. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Industrialization, what the heck is it? It's the increased mechanization of products, and the social changes that accompanied this shift had their roots in several influences. So we're getting more industrial. And I can relate to this too. On my mom's side in Malta, they were farmers. My dad's side in Mexico, farmers. Where did both sides of my family come? To Detroit for industry, right? So this is a shift in what you're doing to make a living. Among these were the clubbing exchange, the rise of maritime trading empires, increased agricultural productivity, and greater individual accumulation of capital. So you're seeing the potential for upward mobility here. As the Industrial Revolution spread from Great Britain to Europe and North America, and then to the world, it reshaped society, increasing world population, shifting people from farm to city, and expanding the production and consumption of goods. So those are some big themes of this chapter. All right, let's talk about agricultural improvements. Okay, that's our next topic. Just before the Industrial Revolution in the early 1700s, an agricultural revolution resulted in increased productivity, crop rotation, the seed drill. They both increased food production. So we're making more food, we're making it faster. Also, the introduction of the potato. South America contributed more calories to people's diets. As nations industrialized, their population grew because more food was available to more people. Because of improved medical care, infant mortality rates declined. Now people are living longer. With these demographic changes, more people were available to work in factories and to provide a market for manufactured goods. That's, again, you see some Detroit history there, right? Ford Motor Company, the $5 a day, all of a sudden his workers became customers. Now you can afford to buy the product you're making. Okay, during the 18th century, most British families lived in rural areas, grew most of their food, and made most of their clothes. So people are very self-sufficient, right? Now, as a result of this commercial revolution, the establishment of maritime empires, Indian cotton became available in Britain. And before long, it was in high demand. Put that in the back of your mind when we cover the Civil War. Because Indian cotton doesn't get talked about a lot. May very well have changed the course of the Civil War. We'll talk about that later. To compete with Indian cotton, investors in Britain began to build their nation's old cotton cloth industry. Using imported raw cotton produced by slave labor in the Americas, the British developed the cotton industry system in which merchants provided raw cotton to women who spun it into finished cloth in their own homes. So women are working at home, making money, and they can still care for their children. So this was, this was a real shift in what women are doing throughout the day. And it's kind of empowering, right? But it's not going to last too long. However, cottage industry production was slow, and investors, they wanted faster production. So a big theme in the Industrial Revolution, remember last year we talked about the Bessemer process, right? You're going to see people inventing things, all these different things in all these different industries. What are they trying to do, right? Time is money, right? In the real world, time is money. How can you make something faster, cheaper, and make more of it in a short amount of time? If you can figure that out, you could become rich. So there's always a drive to make things faster. Mid-18th century, the spinning jenny's invented. This reduced the time needed to spin yarn, and the water frame's invented. And it's used the water power as to drive the spinning wheel. The water frame was more efficient than a single person's labor, and this mechanization doomed the household textile cottage industry. Production was moved to factories big enough to house these bulky machines, and Richard Arkwright is going to become, he's the guy that invented the water frame. He's going to be known like the father of the factory system. So doing things quickly, mass production, that's where, and people are losing their jobs. That's the thing today, to this day, right? Tons of Detroit history, right? As technology grows and grows, people are getting laid off, losing their jobs. You're no longer needed, right? So pros and cons of all this technology. Now, interchangeable parts. In 1798, there's this inventor. His name's Eli Whitney. That name should sound familiar to you. He gets, I think usually in U.S. history books, his design of the cotton gin, he's more famous for that. But I don't think he made much money on that. I think he had patent issues with that. He makes his money making interchangeable parts for the manufacture of firearms for the U.S. military. So he comes up with this concept: if a particular component of a machine were to break, the broken component could easily be replaced with a new identical part. Again, what is this doing? Saving time, saving money, allowing you to manufacture things at a fast rate. So entrepreneurs, they're adapting his method. So this isn't just about firearms or the military. I think this is where he made his money, because he didn't make much on the cotton gin, if I remember right. But the other contribution here, the big contribution here, is that they're adapting his method of manufacturing, interchangeable parts. His system is going to lead directly to the division of labor. What does that mean? More Detroit history, right? Think assembly line, where you don't have a skilled laborer doing everything from A to Z. Now you take someone who's not really that skilled, but you do one thing. You're going to do this one thing over and over again. So you're going to get better at it. You're going to get faster at it, right? You just do this one thing, and now we can produce things a lot faster. And we kind of have like unskilled labor now instead of skilled labor. And this is a whole, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but now this is, people can make money doing this instead of being a farmer. You're not sitting on a PhD and you want to make some money, you can work in the factories. But there is a dehumanization process here that the AmSchool text doesn't talk about. You're kind of like a cog. You're just a part of a machine. And this has a drastic effect on its workers. But to try to make more money for their families, people are leaving the farms and are going to go work in factories and going to live in cities. All right. Britain's industrial advantages. Britain had many environmental and geographic advantages that made it a leader in industrialization. With its seaways on the Atlantic, Great Britain could import raw materials and export finished goods at large volumes. Great Britain also was sitting on a ton of coal. So the coal mines in Great Britain, and man, you talk about a tough job. When I worked on the assembly line at Ford, when I was a young man, we had a lot of assembly line workers. And assembly line work was terrible. The one reason, I went out and got a bunch of degrees. I hated the assembly line, right? But man, compared to the coal mines, I had a lot of friends on the assembly line. They were, as the AMSCO text says, the coal mines in Great Britain. We also had in the U.S., West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. I had a lot of friends on the assembly line here in Detroit, from Kentucky, from West Virginia. Not so many from Pennsylvania, but at least the ones I knew. Most of them were from West Virginia and Kentucky. The stories about working in the coal mines made the assembly line look like a gravy job. And you're talking about getting black lung, dying early, horrible. I mean, Google or go on YouTube and see what it was like to work in a coal mine. This small little area, just, I can't even think about it. But I couldn't imagine doing it. I thought the assembly line was the hardest thing I ever did. But compared to the coal mines, that was nothing. So there's an opportunity for money, but man, you're working hard. And again, there's a dehumanization process in a lot of this labor. Because of the massive profits from the transatlantic slave trade, British capitalists have excess capital to invest. So, that's a whole different topic, man. I mean, rich people are getting richer off of the slave labor. So even though when the slave trade ends and slavery ends, people are still making millions of dollars off of that. Free labor. Oh my God. I mean, there's so much money at the top. You don't have to pay your workers. So people are benefiting financially from slavery well after it ends. And there's books written, there's arguments to this day. I mean, there's money being made in 2020 that if you trace if you follow the money, it comes from slave labor. Okay. Rivers in Great Britain, they have a lot of rivers. This allows them to transport raw materials and finished products cheaply. So things you may take for granted, rivers and, if time is money, time is money, time is money. This is a theme throughout this whole thing. If you can do something faster, you can make more money. The world's largest navy didn't hurt nothing either, right? Great Britain has this large navy, and they're helping with shipping. And there's another thing going on in Great Britain. You may take it for granted today, living in Detroit, living in the United States, democracy, capitalist society. But at the time, this is a big deal. Great Britain's providing legal protection of private property, so it ensures entrepreneurs their business would not be taken away. So what the heck does that mean? This is where, you kind of take this for granted because you grew up in a democracy and a capitalist society. There's countries and there's different forms of government where the government would seize your property. And they could nationalize your business. If you remember last year, when 1959, Castro overtakes Batista, comes in with Che Guevara, Raul Castro. What do? They nationalize Shell Oil. Shell Oil went nuts, right? Remember that story? Remember we talked about Ayn Rand, author of Atlas Shrugged. She's a Russian Jew. When the Bolsheviks come in, they took away her father's business. She comes to America, and that's why she absolutely hated communism and had the views that she had, whether you agree with them or not. But that's what people were going through. Here's this business you worked hard for, and the government could just take it. So this assurance, this gave entrepreneurs a lot of confidence. So if entrepreneurs have confidence to invest, your overall, your GNP is gonna go up, and your overall productivity of your country is gonna go up. So that was a big guarantee that nobody's gonna come down and take it. The increase in agriculture production caused two shifts in society. Okay, these two big shifts. As farmers grew more food, they could support more people. Two, as they grew it more efficiently, society needed a smaller percentage of the population working in agriculture. So you're going to see this shift from rural societies to urban societies. But so these growing rural populations, though, they don't stay there. English towns had traditionally allowed farmers to cultivate land or tend sheep on government property known as the commons. This custom ends with the enclosure movement. The government, what they did was they fenced off the commons, and it was only now exclusively the people who paid for the privilege and who purchased the land. So many farmers, they're becoming landless and they're becoming destitute. And the enclosure movement was instrumental in this wave. There's a huge demographic change. And they're forcing small farmers to move from rural areas to urban areas, such as like Manchester and Liverpool. The people who moved then became the workforce for the new growing industry. So you're taking these people who were traditionally farmers, now they're factory workers. So this whole time, I know we're talking about Great Britain, but I'll finish where I started. This is Detroit history. This is going to set the stage for Detroit to become Detroit. So this does have an effect. And when you read this history, go back in your own family. Were there any farmers in your family that became factory workers? I know there were in mine. All right, so that's it for topic 5.3, short topic.